Satoshi Nakamoto created Bitcoin, digital money was born. Satoshi was an unprecedented genius and did everything by himself. Not quite like that. In fact, what you probably don't know is that Bitcoin started long before the Genesis block or even the white paper. I'm Carol, co-founder of Area Bitcoin, and this video has a paleological touch. I'm going to unearth the prehistory of Bitcoin and everything that allowed it to exist, but that few people know about. And if you want to delve even deeper into Bitcoin, I invite you to subscribe and stay tuned for the next videos. So let's get to know the projects that inspired Satoshi Nakamoto to create Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not something that emerged overnight, and it's the result of 40 years of research and dozens of attempts to create digital money independent of banks and governments. Several people have predicted Bitcoin in the past, from physics geniuses to Austrian economics, computer engineers, and investors annoyed with inflation. Friedrich Hayek, an Austrian economist, said in 1984, "I don't believe we will have good money again until we take it out of the government's hands. Since we can do it violently, all we can do is by some sly roundabout introduce something they can't stop." Milton Friedman commented in 1999 that one of the things that was missing for the internet to reduce the size of corrupt government is some form of e-cash, electronic money. Writers of the book Sovereign Individual predicted Bitcoin 10 years earlier by stating that soon you will pay for almost any internet transaction using cyber money. This new digital form of money is set to play a key role in cyber commerce. It will consist of encrypted sequences of prime numbers, hundreds of digits long. Unique, anonymous, and verifiable, this money will accommodate the largest transactions. It will also be divisible into the smallest fraction of value. It will be tradable at the press of a button in a borderless multi-billion-dollar wholesale market. They even commented in the book how this money will help people not to be expropriated by inflation. The details described and the similarity to Bitcoin are impressive. Also, Tesla and Henry Ford predicted more than 100 years earlier the creation of energy-backed money that would end the incentives for war. Bitcoin has always been a latent idea waiting to be realized. And even though the technical and cryptographic basis of Bitcoin are around 50 years old, the concept of it as an independent digital money resistant to inflation and corruption, which gives individual sovereignty over governments, which promotes peace by defunding wars, and is supported in energy, is much more earlier than the cypherpunks of the 80s. It is something that humanity has been waiting for millennia. Those who started looking for ways to implement all these concepts in a single technology were the cypherpunks of the past. Cypherpunks are a community of activists, cryptographers, and hackers who advocate the use of cryptography as a tool to protect privacy and freedom in the digital age where mass surveillance is overgrown. One of the main projects focused on transaction privacy and which inspired the creation of Bitcoin was eCash, created by David Chaum in 1982. eCash was a digital currency that used cryptography to guarantee anonymity and security for transactions. Bitcoin is not anonymous, it is pseudonymous, but it took from eCash the idea of digitally creating something that could be transacted like physical money, cash, and that the bearer had full autonomy to make payments without third parties being able to intervene or track the transaction. The big problem was that eCash was focused on banks. They could issue digital notes encrypted for customers, which could be stored on their personal computers, and therefore to make a payment, the customer sends these digital notes to the merchant, who in turn forwarded them to the bank for verification and deposit. This was possible through blind signatures, in which banks could intermediate negotiations but could not track the information in eCash. You already understand why it didn't work out, right? eCash depends on intermediaries, banks, and these intermediaries, willingly or under pressure from governments, want to track. They want to have data on all operations of everyone who transacts in their systems. And although David Chaum is one of the pioneers when it comes to cryptography and privacy-focused money, he has also attacked Bitcoin. He created 2 blockchain and crypto projects and claimed that his projects were better than Bitcoin. Even though he was an experienced and privacy-minded cryptographer, David did not fully understand Bitcoin's incentives, decentralization, and inimitable properties. Maybe that's why, once again, none of his projects came to fruition, and having inspired the creation of Bitcoin was one of his greatest achievements. This This just shows why it is not always the people in the most technical capacity who understand Bitcoin the first time, but rather the people in the greatest ability to connect dots from multiple areas of knowledge. Another precursor to Bitcoin was e-gold, created by Douglas Jackson and Barry Downey in 1996. If you lived through the year of 96, you will remember. While everyone was dancing the Macarena, two guys from Florida were racking their brains to create digital currencies based on gold. They decided to place gold coins in a vault in Melbourne and sell digital parts of these coins on a website. Soon, these coins were called e-gold, electronic gold. E-gold was used by around 1 million people and became the first credit card-free payment service that could be integrated into online stores. Furthermore, e-gold was divisible into thousands of grams of gold. It was the first working micropayment system. You could send a 10-cent tip in gold to anyone. Until to date, this is not possible with credit cards and PayPal, as transactions costs are still very high. Precious metals exchanges began to use them first, then online platforms, followed by auction houses, casinos, political and non-profit organizations. Then exchange emerged, and with the increase in popularity, e-gold began to attract the attention of hackers. The e-gold system was not secure enough, and many customers were hacked and unfortunately lost their funds. Also, the government was watching. Even though Douglas and Barry did everything they could to keep e-gold operating according to American rules, they were at the mercy of state blackmail and were unable to keep e-gold afloat. They were judicially attacked. With the Patriotic Law signed in 2001, the president at the time, George W. Bush, suspended civil rights such as privacy. This law allowed the control of telephone calls, email exchange, medical records, and banking transactions. It exposed the private life of the population as a whole. With this new law, the tax authorities froze Douglas and Barry's gold reserves, and most users stopped using e-gold. E-gold was not granted a license to operate. The creators had to face legal action for money laundering, and in 2008, Douglas was sentenced to 300 hours of community service and $200 fine. E-gold left many lessons that were probably understood by Satoshi and inspired his anonymity. When governments cannot control the growth of something, they persecute the creators and kill the project by changing laws and applying legal processes that made it impossible for the project to proceed in a centralized manner through companies and with active leaders. And still regarding the correlation with gold, in 1997, Adam Back developed Hashcash, a proof-of-work system that was designed to prevent email spam. The system was later adapted and used on the Bitcoin network as a mechanism to secure the network as a whole. Hashcash has been officially named Hash Partial Collision-Based Posting Scheme. This mechanism is mentioned in Bitcoin white paper and used in Bitcoin mining. The idea of using partial hashes is that they can be arbitrarily expensive to compute, and yet they can be verified instantly, wrote Adam Back when explaining Hashcash. Hashcash has a direct correlation with Bitcoin mining, and it is because of digital mining that Bitcoin is protected with hundreds of terahashes per second of computing power, and it is so difficult to attack the network, unlike the hacker attacks that e-gold suffered. Another project that inspired creation of Bitcoin was Bitgold, created by Szabo in 1998 and published in 2005 in a post in his personal blog called Unnumerated, about theoretically decentralized financial systems that would combine different elements of cryptography and mining. Bitgold was the project that came closest to Bitcoin's arrangement. In the project description, Szabo describes Bitgold not just as a payment system, but also as a long-term store of value independent of any trusted authority. Szabo was also the first to come up with the term smart contract to script programmable financial operations. It was probably from e-gold, Hashcash, and Bitgold that Satoshi imported the concepts of scarcity, mining, and the usefulness of gold as a monetary commodity whose creation is independent of governments. In other words, the use of gold as a means of exchange and also as a store of monetary value. There are several quotes from Satoshi regarding gold. Here, for example, Satoshi says, "It's the same situation with gold and gold mining. The marginal cost of gold mining tends to be close to the price of gold. Gold mining is wasteful, but this waste is much less than the usefulness of having gold available as a medium of exchange." I think the case will be the same for Bitcoin. The utility of the exchange made possible by Bitcoin will far exceed the cost of the electricity used. Therefore, not having Bitcoin would be a net waste. Satoshi's words. The concept of decentralization came from Bitgold, and the fact that Satoshi was anonymous, left everything open source and did not create a company was probably a lesson from eGold's failure and the government persecution of its creators. Now when it comes to transactions, here comes another great inspiration. B-Money from 1998, a project by Wei Dai, a computer scientist and cryptographer. B-Money was a distributed and anonymous electronic money system that avoids double spending. Double spending is when someone tries to use the same funds more than once. In other words, it's as if the person had paid $50 in paper bills and could continue using the same bills as if they hadn't spent anything. This has always been the biggest challenge when creating digital money, preventing infinite copy and paste. The only way to solve this was through centralization and having an intermediary mediating the transactions. Wei Dai managed to solve double spending by distributing responsibility for verifying transaction, but it was still not decentralized. He proposed that collective accounting was necessary, with cryptographic protocols helping to authenticate transactions. It was this suggestion that possibly led Satoshi to also incorporate mechanisms such as timestamping, blockchain, or time chain, as Satoshi himself referred to distributed and collaborative records. Wei Dai also suggested using digital signatures or public keys to authenticate transactions and enforce contracts. Although B-Money resolved double spending, it is a project that never got off the ground. This project was so important that it was mentioned in the Bitcoin white paper. In other words, Wei Dai had many insights that guided the path for Satoshi to arrive at Bitcoin. Perhaps because of these suggestions from Wei Dai, Satoshi included studies by Stuart, Haber, and Stornetta as basis for how Bitcoin works and as a reference in white paper as well, just like B-Money from Wei Dai and Hashcash from Adam Back. The timestamp system suggested by Stuart Haber and Stornetta in 1991, 20 years before Bitcoin, is what supports information chaining. At the time, no one even dreamed of calling this system a blockchain. They had this impulse to create a digital record system that was immutable because there was a scandal with biology paper that had been fraudulent at the time. Someone managed to change what was written in the article using special ink. Stuart and Scott were shocked by this and thought, well, if it is so easy to falsify data recorded on paper, it is even easier digitally. To solve this, they imagined blocks of information linked to each other chronologically and in an immutable way. In 1992, they included encryption in this recording mechanism, and until 2008, this invention had no name and no real use case. In the white paper, Satoshi refers to blocks of information and chain data using hash functions to create a timeline of records that cannot be changed, a time chain. The time chain mentioned by Satoshi is what most today recognize as blockchain. After understanding the entire history of Bitcoin, do you now understand why Bitcoin is so unique? No project before has managed to unite all these points. These studies together guided Satoshi to his greater discovery, Bitcoin. Do you realize now how none of these technologies alone can do what Bitcoin does? It's their specific arrangement at a specific moment in history that allowed Bitcoin to decentralize and have the network effect it has today. It is not possible to copy Bitcoin because this arrangement is not replicable. This is why a blockchain alone or within a company is of little use. It is only mutable and decentralized if it has all the other characteristics such as computational power, if it is open source, does not have anyone deciding any update, and it is distributed. Otherwise, it's just an expensive and slow record system because it can't do anything right, neither protect the records nor be scalable. Bitcoin was a latent idea waiting to be finally discovered. It took 40 years of cryptography research, but millennia of diverse populations being stolen via monetary dilution and attack by governments and empires. Satoshi is a pseudonym for someone or someones who managed to understand the cards on the table and acted to cover the biggest failure points of previous projects. It is the union of technical, philosophical, monetary, physical concepts and game theory through incentives that makes Bitcoin what it is. Satoshi went further because he climbed on the shoulders of giants and then he was able to see further. This network is protected by cryptography and operates without a central authority, making it resistant to manipulation manipulation and fraud. Satoshi's creation of Bitcoin made it possible for individuals to have direct control over their money without the need for intermediaries. Satoshi Nakamoto was successful in building decentralization into Bitcoin by designing the network to operate peer-to-peer, P2P. To achieve this, Satoshi implemented several key features into the Bitcoin network and also gave up his ego and fortune. It's crazy that now, 15 years after the creation of Bitcoin, these cypherpunks from the past and present continue to inspire new solutions. Protocols like Fedimint and Cashew built on the eCash of David Chaum and Wei Dai. The demand for privacy and sovereign money tends to be met through Bitcoin and the solutions supported by it at other layers. History also has proven that nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come, and Bitcoin era has just begun. And if you want to delve even deeper, subscribe here in the channel, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time and opt out.